first to the announcement by the National Trust that it can no longer fund some historic landmarks and homesteads and is considering mothballing a third of its properties. Closing down regional tourist attractions will not go down well with regional communities, a fact not lost on either the National Trust or the politicians who fund them. Cooma Cottage in Yass is a case in point. Adam Shirley reports.
It's one of the key tourist destinations in our area.
It's a wonderful place for Yass. It's a coup that we live around such a magnificent property.
That's what we asked them. Why did you pull into Yass? Why are you here? And they say, well, I've always wanted to come and see Cooma Cottage. Hume was a really, really important, courageous... There's a whole lot of things written about him in the past, but we still don't emphasise it enough. Hume and Hovell did a trek that was really poorly funded, poorly resourced, a difficult trek, and yet they survived, and Hume was the man who ensured that happened. Cooma Cottage to me is probably one of the, inside the list of top 10 places that should be, at all costs, be preserved and known about and taught about.
It's Hamilton Hume's place of residence. He originally came from Appin, where he started a lot of his explorations, and when he discovered the Yass Plains, he fell in love with the place, and it opened up the Goulburn Valley and also the Lambing Flats, what they call, which was Young area, and he fell in love and stayed here until he died. Interesting, in the house there's fireplaces in every room, obviously for the intense cold winters, as we know what they're like, and every room has actually doors leading outside. And there's a magnificent tree out the front facing the river, which is called a Peconia tree. And that Peconia tree, actually, Hamilton brought it over from the Canary Islands, and there's only 6 of them in Australia of that size.
It links into other tourism issues. When people come to Yass, they're looking at what we have to offer. Cooma Cottage is certainly right up the top of the list because it's promoted everywhere, it's promoted on the highways. We always send our tourists out there, and people that come out there are often sent back in here. There's a lot of other heritage associated with Yass Town itself that can link in to the Cooma Cottage story. To lose something as important as that, we couldn't contemplate that under any circumstances, and I don't think that the state or the nation should contemplate losing access to such a historic building.
We have no plans for closing Cooma Cottage, and we recognise that it is absolutely significant. But the reality is, if the trust movement, who are charged with protecting heritage, are not sufficiently funded, what choice do we ultimately have? I've had experience myself growing up connected to the Yass community, and it's absolutely important for the community well-being that these marvellous places are maintained, and we think about that all the time.
I would like to reinforce to the National Trust that this is a treasure for us. This is a gem for Yass. We learn about it in primary school, we go and visit it. We've got friends who are volunteers out there, and Cooma Cottage has been very much, I guess, a part of our lives for a very long time. If the organisations in financial difficulties, they should be working through those issues with the relevant ministers and looking at ways of perhaps using what they have, the assets they have, to actually become income earners for them. There are ways you can do that. In fact, I met with the CEO on 2 occasions already, CEO of the National Trust, and we were discussing future use for Cooma Cottage as a museum.
Now, the thought of having a transport and agricultural heritage museum is a very, very good fit. If the north-south highway was opened up by Hume here in his building in a place that's situated within 40 minutes of Canberra, what a great way to celebrate transport and agricultural heritage. Our next move is to back into corporations, into the transport industry and back into tourism. And when we get an indication of that, Adam, then we can move forward. The first step is to get some preliminary funding to do a decent study. The international trust movement is suffering. I don't think there's any trust internationally or nationally that are really surviving unless they have appropriate amount of government funding. This is a community not-for-profit who look after government or community assets, and without appropriate funding, they're just simply not sustainable. Now's the time, and appropriate funding, $2 million for regional heritage who hitherto have not had a programmatic way of supporting their fantastic old buildings. That would be the right thing for the government to do.
It's just a peace and serenity. It's like 100 acres. I feel very, very privileged to actually to be caretaker out here. So it's just a beautiful. The birds sing, the kangaroos, there's rabbits everywhere. Even though that's a bit annoying, but foxes. So I feel like I'm back in the country.
We should be doing more, I think, for the name of Hume, and therefore this place can be the, you know, the centre point of that, and bring to school kids and tourists the story of Hamilton Hume and try and bring his story alive. I don't think the locals would have a bar of closing Cooma Cottage. I cannot see it. You know, not from what I gauge from the people who love Cooma Cottage, who work here, who have worked here, you know, who volunteer, who put in a good word, who just supply money too. There's many hundreds who give, you know, at a stall, cake stall or whatever. They support Cooma Cottage. I mean, if they really got stung into action, you know, I don't think they could let it close. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't.